Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of Parenthoot Spotlight, the space where once a month we pause and shine a gentle, loving light on a parent who's building something not just for their own child, but for many. Someone whose work ripples outward, validating, healing, inspiring, or reshaping how we experience childhood, parenthood, and everything that sits in between. Today's guest is someone whose work I encountered long before I ever imagined she would one day be sitting across from me on a recording like this. She is funny, she is honest, she is observant in a way only someone deeply present inside the chaos of motherhood can be. I'm speaking about the brilliant Mary Catherine Starr, illustrator, creative voice behind Mom Life Comics, and author of the wildly relatable, deeply validating book, Mama Needs a Minute. If you've ever felt mentally overloaded, laughed while crying, or thought, surely there must be a comic about this exact moment, chances are Mary has already drawn it. And thousands of mothers have commented, OMG, same. Mary, I'm so happy you're here. Welcome to Parenthood Spotlight.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And thank you for that very generous introduction.
Thank you. And I want to start right at the beginning. How did you begin creating comics about motherhood? What was that first spark, the moment when you thought, this needs to be drawn, this needs to be said?
So I actually started making comics kind of accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the throes of early motherhood. I had a 3-year-old and a couple month old. And I was at that time, I'm a graphic designer. So I was already, pretty comfortable creating content for online. I've been doing it for my graphic design clients. I've been a blogger for a bunch of years at that point too, like back in the old school days of blogging. And
Yeah.
so, I was comfortable creating for any kind of, I guess we didn't call it content back then, but
Yes.
I was comfortable creating for the internet and talking about my life through my blog and working on graphic designs for clients. So I was in those early days of motherhood, I was writing on my blog, but I also had a personal Instagram where I would talk a little bit about motherhood and the challenges of it. And I just felt like I needed a more of an outlet for that. And so I over time I didn't say, "Oh, I'm going to start making comics." It was very much like I was writing about this, about how hard how hard motherhood was and how
Yes.
shocked I was by how hard it was. And I thought, like, I need some sort of image to go with this writing I'm doing for my blog and for my personal Instagram. And so I started just playing with doing little illustrations because I was finding that the connect between, what I wanted to say, which was often pretty intense and talking about hard stuff, and the pictures I had, which were, like me and my kids smiling, or,
Yeah.
I didn't want to post at that time, it was all highlight reel. People weren't posting the pictures of themselves, as a mess. And so I needed some imagery to share with some of the stuff I was talking about. So I started making these little illustrations. And I think my kind of way of approaching hard things is often through humor. It's
Yeah.
like that's how I process things. And so I would talk about how hard it was in the caption or in the blog post. And then the image I would make to go with it would kind of poke fun at that. So I might draw a mom who, had stains all over her and had crazy hair who was saying something. And it was just an easy way for me to kind of capture how I was feeling through a very simple drawing. And as I started sharing those, again, I didn't call them comics then. I wasn't really doing long narrative kind
Yeah.
of work like I am now. But I just started noticing that people were really responding to them. And even though it was just my personal Instagram at that time and it was very small, the people who were following me would reshare it or comment and send it to friends. And I was seeing that okay, something about these little images I'm creating are really they're making people feel seen. And I wasn't a conscious awareness like that, but it was kind of just like, oh, people are liking these. I should keep making them. And it was fun for me. It was a new creative outlet for a new mom who was, in the thick of it and looking for ways to kind of find myself again as a creative and as an artist. And so it just kind of became something I started to do. And obviously there's a lot more that happened along the way, but that was the starting point. And then the pandemic hit, which so I started doing the comics in January 2020. And then a few months
Wow.
later, the pandemic hit, and that's when I really kind of started. I mean, I went, I was still doing like one every couple weeks. It wasn't like I was, doing them every day, but I started making it a more regular thing. And then, as mothers felt more and more overwhelmed and lost and angry and alone during the pandemic, I think we were all heading to the internet to find other moms who felt the same way. And so I think it was kind of the right time for the message I was putting out. And I mean, I could go on, but that's where it all started.
Yeah, yeah. And Mary, so many mothers, myself included, talk about how motherhood shifts everything: identity, creativity, boundaries, emotions, expectations, and also relationships to an extent, to a large extent. What changed for you when you became a parent in your art, in your inner world, in your sense of self?
I mean, I truly think everything changed. It's like there's not a part of my life that I don't think hasn't been touched by
Hmm.
becoming a mother. And I think probably the biggest things that did for me, one, it kind of awakened me to this entire other life experience that so many people are having, right? Like
Yeah.
before you're a mom, you don't know. You're like, what's the problem, everybody? And
Yeah.
frankly, I didn't even know there was a problem. I just
Yeah.
thought like, okay, moms are doing a lot. They're tired, but like they're fine. Everybody's fine. And I think once I realized like what this entire huge part of the population is carrying around, which is the responsibility of raising the next generation and caring for and um, not just caring for, but also like really nurturing these beings. That is something I had no idea. I had no idea what that entails and how much that takes for a
Yeah.
person. Excuse me. Um, and so, I think being awakened to that, it was like I like tapped into this whole universe where obviously things are really amazing and also things are really hard. And I think I felt just like a little shell shocked, but also really galvanized. Like I felt like, oh, this is something I have a lot to say about this.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Most people, if you're not a mother, you have no idea what all of these women are going through and what they're handling on a daily basis. And somehow they're still showing up at work and they're dressed and they've done their hair, all these things where I'm like, how is everybody doing this? And
Yeah.
so I think that feeling was so strong. And that's really what I think started to seep into my creative work. But I think the other side of that is I had no idea, some of the double standards, and which is what I talk about a lot in my work. I had no idea the way that moms and dads are treated so differently. I had no idea the way that those cultural expectations and the double standards of our society would seep into my relationship, my household, as a woman who before kids was in a very equal relationship. I felt like
Hmm.
we were in a very feminist, forward-thinking, modern relationship. My husband and I, did the dishes together every night, went grocery shopping together, did our laundry together. Everything was very even and equal. And, sure, there were places where he would be better at something or I would, but I never felt like I was carrying the weight of the household. And I think what was so shocking to me was that very quickly,
Hmm.
that shifted after kids. And
Yeah.
it was like there was no one moment, but it was just a slow, slippery slide into this much more what would appear to be kind of traditional gender roles,
Yeah.
a relationship and household split by gender roles. And that was so upsetting to me as someone who really prided myself on not being in a relationship that was
Yeah.
traditionally gendered. So, those are, I think, the two biggest things that I have informed. Those are the two biggest like shocks and changes that have really informed what I do now.
Yeah.
And had made me so passionate about, talking about the experience of motherhood and the experience of being a person in a heterosexual relationship in our current world.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And your comics are so sharp. They take something chaotic and turn it into something simple, clear, and hilarious, of course. How do you observe life as a mother? Are you someone who jots things down as they happen, or do
Yeah.
ideas come later once the house is maybe quiet again?
I think it's both. When I started, it was very much just like, my life was just, I was in those early days, right? So it's almost like everywhere you look, you find inspiration, because
Yeah.
it was just like nonstop being needed, being wanted, feeling just that like being pulled in every direction. And so I feel like also at that age, I had a toddler and the stuff toddlers say is so insane,
Oh, yeah.
So it was like I was writing down the things she was saying all the time just because not even for comics, just because they were so funny that I wanted to not forget them, you know? But I feel like it was really rich. That was the pandemic. Like everything could have been a comic. And as I've gotten further from that time, I'm able to do a little more reflecting on that. And, I still think that time is very ripe for pulling creative inspiration out of. But also now, I've moved less from those like kind of early, really kind of survival mode days to I'm able to pull back and do some more bigger picture stuff and more social commentary. And I get a lot of messages from followers now because I have this, huge community of like-minded mothers who are sending me ideas. Oh, I'd love to see a comic about this. So I get inspiration now. I mean, I get it from the news, all the many horrible news stories about inequality and about what's happening to women all over the world. So my inspiration now kind of comes from everything. But yes, I'm constantly writing things down. I have a Google Doc that's just, 40, 50 pages of just random
Wow.
ideas. Some of them I'll probably never even look at again, but I'm always writing things in my notes app and my Google Doc. And then I'm also, I'm in the shower when I'm on a walk, I get an idea and I jot it down on a piece of paper. So I think, unfortunately and fortunately, life is full of inspiration for someone talking about what it's like being a woman and a mom and how hard that can be.
Yeah, yeah. And walk me through your creative process from noticing a moment to turning it into a panel. What
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah. So I type out like I'll type out a little rough outline. So I'll write out the text that I want in the comics and then I will go back and kind of write myself notes about what I want the imagery to be. So, like this first one I want it to be a mom who's holding a pot of coffee or whatever. And then I kind of take that rough outline and I will typically create the panels, put the text in, and then start doing the drawings. But often I find that that process from what I imagined at the beginning and what I end up with is so different because usually I'll have a really good starting place and I'll think it's going to end one way, but as I'm drawing and as I'm working on it, I'll get new ideas or I'll think, oh my gosh, what if it ended like this? Or I need a new panel at the end to kind of close it all up. So, I mean, I think the creative process is so fun because I think
Yeah.
often I never really know how a comic's going to end. And as I'm working, something comes to mind, which is why I think we can't outsource stuff like this to AI. And I'm always,
Yeah.
people always ask me, like, don't you love AI? Because you could just feed it your comics and it can make them for you. And I'm like, the ideas are coming in the actual drawing and the process. When I'm sitting there just drawing the lines, I get ideas for new stuff. You can't outsource that thinking creative process. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I find it really exciting to make them because I think I never know where they're going to end up.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that note, do you ever create something that feels too vulnerable to share? How do you decide what goes out into the world and what remains private?
Yeah, so when I first started making the comics, I didn't have a big audience. So I was really comfortable sharing because it was, a very small group of people who were seeing my vulnerable stuff. Um, and I really love as a creative person, part of what I love is sharing the hard stuff that we don't usually say out loud.
Yeah.
And I find that to be really healing when I read that kind of content. And so that's the kind of content I want to put out there. I love reading memoirs. I love hearing people's kind of deepest, darkest stuff they're struggling with. And so that was really what I started out doing. And I was at the beginning saying a lot about the inequality in my household and my husband, who I love very much, but who I was pretty angry at during those first few years of
Yeah.
motherhood. I mean, I was angry. I felt like it was very unfair what was happening in our house, and I didn't understand why he couldn't just step up. So I talked about that a lot, and it was really therapeutic and wonderful. And I think other moms felt really seen by that because they felt this, a lot of people felt the same way, that you can love your partner and still be really angry about how parenting has changed for you, has how easy it is for them compared to how hard
Yeah.
it is for you,
Yeah.
right? But what happened was as my audience grew, I should say I had a comic go viral and all of a sudden you have all these new eyes on you and all these trolls have come, especially angry men who, think I hate men, which I don't.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden it felt like these very vulnerable comics that I'd put out in this safe space, which was a group of like-minded moms, were seen now by people who had no context for them, who aren't mothers, who didn't get it, and were really kind of projecting their feelings onto my comics, and also taking them out of context and thinking the worst of me. So that really changed things for me. And that's really, um, I think there's a good and bad things about that. And I think one of the good
Yeah.
things is it helped encourage me to pull back and talk more about big picture stuff. You
Yeah.
know, instead of saying, here's what I'm experiencing, I can say, here's what so many of us are experiencing. And I moved my personal comics to Substack where I have them behind a paywall. And then
Yeah.
I also wrote my book, and my book is super vulnerable, but it's very honest. And I think some people do read it and probably think it's too much, but it's not for them. It's for the people
Yeah.
who read it and feel seen. And I think the great thing about a book is that, the trolls and people who are going to take it out of context can't get, I mean, you have to buy the book and you have to read it or at least look through it to get the content. So, I'm still able to do that kind of more vulnerable stuff, but I've definitely had to edit it and be thoughtful about where I put it and where I share it. And Instagram is no longer the place for me to get super vulnerable and personal.
Yeah.
I still do it in ways that feel safe and comfortable because it's important to me, but I'm a lot more thoughtful about how I could be portraying my family members
Yeah.
or people that I love who I don't want to be portrayed in a negative light. So
Yeah.
that's been a big shift for me. And it's hard because I think when you are a creative person, if you enjoy connecting with people on this really deep personal level, having to edit yourself for strangers is frustrating. But
Yeah.
it's kind of just part of the game at this point, sadly.
Yeah. Yeah. And your work has such a clear feminist lens. Was that intentional from the beginning, or did it emerge along the way?
It definitely emerged along the way. I did not set out. I mean, truly, there was no like, I'm going to make a feminist mothering comic. It was so not that. It was really just like, I'm struggling. I'm going to talk about it. And then I think I've always thought of myself as a feminist. I was very much raised as a feminist, but it was not something I was thoughtful about at all. But I think what happened very quickly for me, and I think, people, there's this whole trend now, saying like, I was radicalized by whatever. I was
Yeah.
radicalized by motherhood. I really think that it
Yeah.
it made me see how important it is to fight for equality and fight for the rights of women. And um, it just changed everything for me in terms of, again, like I said, like being understanding why women have felt so held back. I think before I had kids, I was kind of a product of this like, we can do everything. We can do it
Yeah.
all. Now we
Yeah.
know there's nothing that men can do that I can't do. I can work hard and I'm a type A person and I can just do it. But then when you're a mom and you see that now there's all these roadblocks in front of you that are not in front of your male counterparts, I think that was like, oh, this is why we need feminism. And I think I knew
Yeah.
that, but not from the same like visceral place.
Yeah.
Um, and seeing how mothers are, so held back in the workplace and how unfair so many of our policies are for mothers and how it's just like the expectations are impossible. All of that made me, I think, much more of a feminist than, and it made me feel like it was important in my work and what I'm putting out there to speak through a feminist lens.
Yeah.
But I still think, I mean, there are so many people who are saying much more than I am, and I think in a much more, I don't know the word, but I think I'm still like a soft feminist. So whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But I think again, like I don't have a thick enough skin to deal with the internet
Yeah.
and how to treat people who are like really wonderfully honest feminists. I feel like I walk that line because at least in what I put on Instagram, not in what I put other
Yeah.
places, but because I am, the male trolls on the internet they have definitely kept me a little more quiet than I would like, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it's just been, it's been a learning experience, and I don't know, it doesn't feel great getting death threats in your DMs. So,
Yeah.
I've definitely, I think, tamped down my message in some ways, and I don't like that, but it's just kind of again like a reality of
Yeah.
where I am right now. Yeah.
Maybe another book out of it.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
I know. Oh my gosh. Well, that's the thing. It's like it all just it keeps coming. So there's always again like inspiration everywhere, and yeah, we'll see what's next.
And so much of what you draw captures the gap between what we are told motherhood would be versus what it actually is. So,
Mhm.
what expectation did you bump up against? Were there any surprises?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so many, and I think the part that's weird for me, the part I was expecting is all the good stuff. Like I was
Mm,
expecting the love. I'd heard so much about how much you love your kids. Obviously, you still can't put that into words, but the parts that I adore, I was kind of expecting. The reason I wanted kids was because I felt that. I was ready for that. I wanted that love. I wanted to care for someone. And I think all of that stuff, the good stuff, is there. And I was expecting that. So I think what was so jarring was that the hard stuff I wasn't
mm,
expecting at all. And I think maybe if you went into motherhood, not expecting to love it as much, maybe it would feel less jarring. I don't know, but I was expecting to love motherhood. Like I
yeah.
was ready. I knew I would love motherhood, but I didn't know how hard it would be. And so that's the part for me that I think was so shocking and shook me to my core and made me feel like angry. I mean, I think angry. I was really angry, I think, in the first year or so of motherhood. Part of that's because my daughter truly did not sleep. I had like
Mm,
one of the worst sleepers. You hear the horror stories about kids who don't sleep. That's how she was. So, I was very sleep deprived. I think I had postpartum anxiety really badly around the sleep, especially. But I was really angry that first year because I felt so alone and I felt so overwhelmed and so anxious. And I felt like I had no idea that this was going to be the experience. I wasn't angry at anyone, that person. I think
yeah.
I just felt like, how could this possibly be so hard? What's wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me. At that point, I had no idea of like the kind of societal reasons that motherhood has gotten so hard for people. But I truly just felt like I was failing and it was impossible. And so I was like very much angry at myself. I was turning on myself. I think I was also just like, I think I had a lot of postpartum rage, but I just felt very much like, how are people doing this? How can I go on? And not in
Yeah.
I was never, suicidal or anything. I know that's a very real part of postpartum depression. I wasn't that, but it was just this feeling of like, I can't possibly do this all. I don't know how. And I think that feeling of like, is there something wrong with me? Why is this so hard? Why do I feel like I'm constantly failing? That has informed so much of my motherhood journey. Even now that I'm 9 years out from that, I still feel the echoes from that first year of feeling that way. And I
Yeah.
think, um, I just, again, like I love being a mother and I loved it that whole first year, even though it was so hard. I loved it. So, I think that's the other part about it is it's just it's so much all at once and it's so intense. And because we no longer live in these villages and we have so little community support, I think, it's really hard wrestling with all of that on your own.
Yeah.
And learning how to be a person again now that you
Yeah.
have these 100 new emotions that are constantly coming up all day long every day.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you talked about community, but you have built another kind of community, a community that feels emotionally connected to your work. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I love it. I think for a while it was weird because I wasn't it was all on the internet, especially during the beginning when it was like still the pandemic and it was very much like it felt really great to have all these people around the world saying, I feel the same way, me too. We're all in this, we're all experiencing this. I mean, that was really wonderful and definitely very healing. But it was also really weird because at that time I still felt very isolated and very
Hmm.
alone.
Hmm.
I think now having that community is amazing because I have much more of a real community in person as well. So I have this great online community, but I also have the real in real life community here. And then I think also, when I writing this book and now getting to go out and do book events and meet other mothers in person has been the best part. And I think that was something, I never could have imagined when I started doing this, but going and sitting and talking in groups of women about these topics has been extremely healing, extremely gratifying. It's made it feel like, okay, this is why I do what I do, because when I see these actual humans and get to connect with them. So yeah, it's been amazing. And I think, working on the internet and being a person who has an internet community is really weird a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But when you have individual connections, whether it's someone like you, now we're having this conversation, whether it's a group, whether it's even just someone in my DMs who, we've kind of grown or, a little bit of a friendship over time. I mean, I think all of that has been really cool and something I never would have expected or predicted at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what kind of messages do you find yourself receiving most often? Are they funny,
Yeah. Yeah.
emotional?
I think the ones that I should say, the ones that really speak to me the most are when people write me messages saying, I didn't realize, I thought that was just me. And
Yeah.
when I saw this comic, or I saw all the comments below it, or, when you said this is exactly what happens in my house every day. It's like you have a video camera in my house, and I thought I was the only one. Those are the messages to me that are just like, oh, yes, this is why I make comics, because I think they're a really wonderful entry point. They're a really great way to spark conversation. They're not too serious. People can see themselves in them, but they don't because they're often, hopefully, a lot of the times funny, people can share them without feeling as vulnerable or without feeling like it's as intense. And so I think um that's what I love about the conversations that they create. We can say, "Oh my, LOL, OMG, me
Yeah.
too." Or like that's just like me, ha ha ha, which is like, yes, on one level it is funny. On another level, it's saying like, wait, how is this an experience that we're all having? How is this a universal experience, this crazy thing you're talking about? And I think it does get us thinking. So those messages where people tell me that my comics make them realize that something is universal and not personal,
Yeah.
those are really great. I also really love the ones where people are telling me that my comic sparked a conversation with their partner. Well, they'll say, I
Mm.
sent this to my husband, and when he read it, he said, do you feel this way? And I was able to say yes. And we had a big conversation. And, that it opens up these paths and lines of communication that maybe weren't open before. That's also really exciting for me. So, anytime I feel like my comics are making a difference in someone's life, even just on a small scale, that feels amazing. And that's like, again, like what keeps me wanting to make more and more, because it feels like, okay, this is, even though it sounds silly, it's just an Instagram post about a comic. I do feel like it's a really great way to kind of introduce these maybe tougher subjects and bigger
Yeah.
concepts that maybe people hadn't been introduced to before. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And how does your husband feel about whatever you're doing?
Yeah, it's been a journey. At the beginning, he was totally on board and really laughing with me. And, he gives me lots of ideas for comics. So he's definitely been a part of the creative process. Then when I had a while where some trolls were really coming after me, that was pretty hard. And there was even a point where he was like, "Are you sure? Maybe you should stop doing this. Is this worth it?" Like it got pretty bleak there for a while and a little scary. And so at that, for a little while, he thought like, I don't know about this. But he's back on board. He has been, I've been doing it for a while now. And yeah, he gives me ideas all the time. He'll say, "Oh, you should make a comic where I'm doing this," and he's not afraid to look stupid. I think he sees himself very much as like a character now. Not. I mean, the comic character is kind of
Yeah.
like he's a stand-in for every man. It's
Yeah.
not as personal. But also he's always been good, even before I did this. He's always been really good at laughing at himself. And part of our love language is making fun of each other in a loving, fun way. And so, he's a good sport and he's okay with it. But he also, I think, appreciates that I've pulled back on the more personal stuff for
Yeah.
the larger Instagram community and have moved that, other
Yeah.
places. Because I do think, it gets old after a while having people say like, just get divorced, when that's not the point at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's in reading that over and over again when someone makes a comic about you, that gets old. And that gets old for me too. It's like I don't need people to keep saying that to me. That's not the point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm very grateful that he is such a good sport, because I think, he's I don't always paint him in the most flattering light. And the fact that he's okay with that is huge.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And also learning from that, right? Like it's not just, it's,
Yeah.
I think men in our lives, when we become public, men also have to change and evolve with us. And
Hmm.
that's a burden that is not theirs to bear, but they have to bear that burden. And
Yeah.
it's so appreciable that they do that.
Yes,
Right.
I agree. I think you're so right. And yeah, I think it holds us both accountable,
Yeah.
too. It holds me accountable as well, because if I'm publicly saying I'm working on this, or we're working on this, or, that this is an important thing for moms, important way for moms to stand up for themselves, or like this is a change that we as mothers can make to make things more equal, I want to walk the walk. I don't want to say that, moms shouldn't be the only ones volunteering in the classroom, and then in my house be the only one volunteering in the classroom. I want to
Yeah.
say, Ben, we both got to volunteer. It can't just be me. We need to get dads in there too, or you got to be the one to take them to this doctor's appointment, even though maybe it's easier because I've always done it, and
Yeah.
but I have to say, like, no, he needs to do this too. I'm going to make the effort. I'm going to step back. I'm going to let him take this on. I'm going to give it to him and trust him. So, it holds us both accountable, I think, to try to make things more equal when you're talking about it all the time. And it's a public thing,
Yeah.
And I also think that I've learned a lot from my followers, from people who send me messages and articles and ideas and concepts, and I'm still learning about all of this too. I feel very much like it's a kind of conversation between me and the online community that I'm a part of, where we're all kind of saying, okay, this isn't the way it should be. It's really hard to change it. Let's all figure out some ways we can do that in very small ways in our own lives in order to hopefully change the cultural conversation. But I'm learning all the time from my followers. I'll post a comic and people say, well, why not do this? And it's like, I hadn't even thought of that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think all, I've grown so much since starting making these, and a big part because I've kind of immersed myself in this world of talking about household and marriage and household equality and marriage equality and how to be more equal parents, what that looks like, how to achieve that, how to push back against cultural expectations. And that's all been a life changer, a game changer for me, just as an individual and as a mother and as a partner. So I'm really thankful. It's been a journey, not just like a creative journey, but also
Yeah.
really a personal one of growth. And we still have a long way to go. So I'm excited to kind
Yeah.
of see
But does
come
it
so far.
ever get tiring?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, a lot of people who create content for the internet will say that, that burnout is very real. I never have a lack of ideas,
Mm.
but always have a lack of time, and I'm always about trying anytime I'm spending making comics or working or, scrolling on my phone or responding to DMs is time I'm not spending doing something else that I care
Yeah.
about. And that's been hard as a person who, I think before kids I was very much a workaholic. I still find a lot of um satisfaction, and I get a lot of value from what I do for work. It's how it's really a big part of my identity. And so I'm always struggling with that because now I do something that you could technically be doing all day every day, right? I could
Yeah.
be I could be making comics and responding and working with brands or what, collaborating, all that. I could do that all the time, all day, every day. And so I've had to learn, and I'm still really working on it, but really be having really good boundaries and you know, trying to let go of some of the stuff that before I couldn't let go of, and in order to be present for my kids, which is easier said than done, but really important to me.
Yeah. And do the kids know what you do?
Yeah, they do. I mean, the book coming out was definitely a big shift. They knew, they've always known, oh, they always talk about mom life comics, and they'll say like, "Are you going to make this into a comic?" And I might say, "Yeah." Um, but when the book came out, my daughter is 9, and so is really into graphic novels. And so when the book came out earlier this year, she was so excited to read it, and that was really hard to navigate because there's a lot of stuff in there is like adult concepts. And there's lots of parts that are just funny things she and her brother have said. And so she loved the comics where they're in it saying, silly things about butts or something that like cracked her up. But there's also stuff in there that's like intense conversations between me and my husband. And I don't want her to I didn't want my kids to think I wrote a book that was just like about bashing dads or
Yeah.
something. And I think if
Yeah.
you dip in and read one comic where I'm angry at him or something, it could seem that way, if you're not reading, because she was just reading the comics, not the actual text that goes with it, introducing the concepts. And
Yeah.
she couldn't understand him anyway. So, I think I'm always trying to walk that line of like raising them in a feminist way, raising them to know, that moms and dads can do the same things and boys and girls can do the same things. And um, also, being honest about the state of the world. Yes, boys and girls and moms and dads can do the same thing, but unfortunately, people expect moms to do way more. And how to say all of that to them in a way that's kid appropriate and also helps them understand why I care about these topics, why I talk about them in my comics. Because I think it can, it if you don't understand the nuance of the conversation, it could come
Yeah.
across as, that I'm just like angry at men or angry at my husband or something. And so that's always I'm always trying to kind of figure that out with them. They're very proud of my, book, and they're very sweet and love my comics, but you know, I just have to be really thoughtful about how I talk about it with them. And I don't know if I always succeed, but I'm trying. And they definitely have started to get some of the concepts. And I love when I hear them kind of processing aloud, some of the same stuff that I'm processing as an adult, and they're processing it now as kids, which is cool to see, and hopefully will, be a good sign for the next generation.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Hopefully, yeah.
do you ever get submissions from your audience which is not universal and you can't relate to it?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I'll get a message where I think, well, there's a couple things. Sometimes I'll get a message where I'll say like, that seems like a really specific
Mm.
issue. Like, yes, that's an example of something bigger that maybe is more universal, but that issue is so nuanced and has so many different personal parts to it that I couldn't really turn this into a comic without it. Like it doesn't feel like, because I would never make a comic about something that I don't relate to,
Mm.
because I feel like I can't do it justice if I can't like understand that issue. So that's it. Yeah, if it's something that's a little too personal, or also I sometimes get stuff that's so cruel. Unfortunately,
Mm.
I think there are also a lot of people who. So the majority of my audience is women who are kind of in my same boat. We really love our partners. We are married to good people and we are also experiencing kind of the results of, the cultural messaging, the society that we live in, the system we live in, the way we and our partners were raised differently, them to be much more entitled or, to be more served or whatever, just because of the way their family of origin was. But ultimately, they want to stay with their partner. They love their partner. They know that, um, that it's not them necessarily. It's maybe some bigger
Yeah.
stuff at play, which is,
Yeah.
I think so that's the majority of my audience. But there are, of course, women in my audience, plenty, who are either were in more abusive relationships, maybe not physically abusive, but where they were really taken advantage of and used by their partners, who are either still in those partnerships or who maybe are separated or divorced now. And so understandably, there's a lot of maybe trauma or extra anger or resentment there, which I fully support. I think, of course, if you were in a relationship like that, you'd feel that way. But I do get some submissions sometimes from people whose partners I think are crossing a line. It's no
Mm.
longer weaponized incompetence. It's no longer, something that's happening to a lot of people because it's a societal expectation. It's something that when I hear it, I think, oh, that's actually just really horrible, and
Mm.
he should not be treating you that way. And that's not something I want to make light of.
Yeah.
But I also have to be really careful in how I respond to those
Yeah.
because you don't want to shame people because I think we're all
Mm.
on a separate journey and just like the people who say to me, like, get a divorce already. Like, I don't want to just put that on someone, but I also don't want to make light of behavior that I think is absolutely unacceptable. I mean, to be
Mm.
clear, I think a lot of this is unacceptable, but I think some of it is a little more excusable because
Yeah.
of the way that the cultural messaging we all receive. And then some of this treatment that I think moms and women are receiving from their partners is not okay at all. And to me, it
Yeah.
is abusive or it is really cruel, purposely cruel. And I don't want to ever make comics about that. So I do have to walk that line as well and navigate, the messages from people saying, what about this behavior? And I think like that behavior is, that's not,
Yeah.
that's very different than what I'm talking about. So
Yes.
Yeah, it's tough. And I think there are some really great creators I follow and writers I follow who I think talk more to that audience. Because I think that we need people to be speaking to how to get out of much more abusive or unequal relationships where someone's being taken advantage of. I think we need to talk about about men who are taking advantage of the system or a bit of women on purpose. But I don't think that that's not what I'm speaking to. I don't have that experience. That's not, my life experience. And so I have like a different kind of audience that I'm speaking to. But
Yeah. But
yeah.
but how do you deal with that kind of emotional burden that you are, burdened with? And
Mhm.
because it's a lot to take, and how do you get okay with that?
Well, I do a lot less. I mean, unfortunately, I do a lot less reading of the comments of my posts these days. Well, I think also you get to a point. I used to respond to every single comment and or read every single comment, and I really was responding to people so much more. And unfortunately, I kind of got to the point where, in order to like protect my peace and my time, I respond to some, as many as I can, but I give myself much more like, okay, if I post something the first day or so, I'll respond to comments and then I'll just back away and let the conversations continue because I think there's a lot of great people saying a lot of great things and they're talking to each other. And I think that's
Yeah.
awesome. So it's almost like creating a support group and then the person who's leading the support group says, I'm gonna let you all just talk amongst yourselves. And so that's been one way I think I've handled it. Same with my DMs. Like I used to be totally on top of them. And unfortunately now I just have like thousands that are unread. And I will every once in a while sit down and try to get through some of them or message people back. But I also think that there's something cathartic about just like sending a message out to a stranger, like which is what people are doing to me, right? They're writing something, they're sending it out. Some of them will even say, like, I know you might not respond to this. And I think people are used to that when they message big accounts. And maybe that's okay, that people are just kind
Yeah.
of using my inbox as a place to vent. And that's, I'm like, great, you can vent in my inbox. Like, I can't possibly respond to all the venting, but I think it's healthy and great. And I'm not here to say, no, don't do it. So I don't know. I mean, I think I've just, as a product of just the account growing and what I talk about, I've just kind of had to learn to do what I can and let go of the rest.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yes, there's of course a little bit of guilt of like, oh my gosh, every once in a while I go like, oh my God, I have so many unread DMs. What am I gonna do? And then I just kind of like close Instagram and go about my day, because I can't. So yeah, I don't know if that's a great answer, but that's just kind of the reality I think of being someone who's on the internet.
Yeah, yeah. And I'd love to hear about the season of motherhood and creativity you are in right now. What feels easy? What feels heavy? What feels tender?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I have to say, I love I'm a much better mother to slightly older kids. Um, just because I think the physical demands of early motherhood were really hard for me. I know everybody's different. But especially the sleep stuff, which like now my children sleep. They still wake up a couple times a week in the night, but maybe once, that's a very
Yeah,
big difference. Um, so as a creative, I have so much more time and energy. My brain is working better. As a mother, I feel like I'm able to be much more present and much more like excited to be with my kids because I'm not so tired and because I feel like I'm a little more I've had a little more me time, a little more even if my me time is working. I mean, that to me feels really it feeds my soul. So it feels like I'm a little more of a human, a full, like well-rounded, fully formed human being, as
yeah,
opposed to just like a mothering machine. And so I'm better at that. I'm better at functioning this way. And my kids are both right now at the exact same school. So they leave on the school bus at the same time and they come home at the same time. And so, I have chunks of time without
yeah,
them. So anyone who has a new child, a new baby listening, like it happens. And it's, before I had them in daycare, but it was always like different schedules. And it wasn't full time because I worked for myself. And then, one was in preschool and one was, so, the schedules were all different. And this last year and this year, the only 2 years I'll have for a long time where they're in the exact same schedule, but it's been amazing.
yeah,
And also then when they get home, I'm able to really like shut my work and put it aside and I'm fully present because I've had a chunk of time to get stuff done. And so it's pretty magical. And I mean, it's definitely still really hard. My kids have all sorts of issues, like we all do, because we're humans, and really big challenges, but also really, really fun stuff. And I went hiking with my kids the other day, and they loved it, and I loved it, and there was no complaining the whole time. And I was like, this is so fun. And so I think I also really enjoy their company. I really think they're fun, funny, and exciting, cool, creative people. And so that's just so nice. I think that's really different when you start to like who your kids are as people, as opposed to just loving them because they're your children. But you see, I think they both have like the best sense of humor and we love laughing together. And that's, so cool. So, um, yeah, it's been exciting as they get older. I think each new stage has been really exciting and fun, and of course hard in its own way. But the physical demands as they've gotten less, I feel like I've been able to emerge more as a person, which is
Yeah.
really, and I think makes me a better mother. I think makes all of us better mothers when we can
Yeah.
when we're a little more well-rounded. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I loved what you said about, liking them as a person rather
Hmm.
than just loving them as your children. And
Yeah.
that's just so beautiful. I'm going to take that back in my
Good.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
And
I mean, and when your kid says something that you think like, that is so smart or
yeah.
wise, or that is so interesting, that's the coolest feeling because you think like, look at you with your own little brain
Yeah.
that's thinking all these things I never would have thought of. And it just feels so magical, like, wow, that's it's such a fun part of motherhood that I didn't expect, again, like
Yeah.
part of the stuff you expected, the stuff you didn't. It's like, oh, I really like you. And that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And tell me, is there a recent observation, contradiction, or moment that's still sitting with you, waiting to become a comic or a sentence or something more?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, right here, I could even show you. I have a piece of paper that I wrote something
Oh,
down the other day where I haven't even put this on my document yet, but it's like I was getting ready and wrote down like, why is mom always the last to get ready? Why is mom always spending more money than everybody? Why is always mom always seem more frazzled? And it's like I get these little things where I'm like, why? Why is that? Obviously I know why, and that's what I want to explore in the comic, but like I think to the outside world, it's like, why is mom always the last one to be ready?
yeah,
Obviously we know it's because she's getting everybody else ready and getting all the stuff ready before she gets herself ready. Or, why is mom always doing so much more shopping and spending so much more money than everybody? Because she's buying supplies for the entire house all the time. And because in order to keep the household running, you have to purchase things like toilet paper and cleaning supplies and food. And you have to order the random tacks that are needed for the bulletin board, all that stuff that moms are thinking about. Why does mom always seem like she's so frazzled? Again, for these reasons. So, I'm always writing down little things about like, how do I want to, what do I want to say about that? And what's a new way to present that might strike a chord for people? Or how can I make that into like a bite-sized chunk that will go like, oh, that answers this question for me. So yeah, I mean, I think I have so many. I mean, I could never even begin to say how many ideas I have that I haven't gotten to explore. But my favorite thing that I always come back to is the double standards. I
yeah,
love drawing comics where it shows on one side
yeah.
what how a dad is labeled and how mom is labeled when they do the same thing. And I feel like I have so many more of those in me. So I'm always just kind of, those are always percolating, and I always have a little list going, and then eventually like, okay, I'm ready to do a new series of these. So yeah, I'm excited to do more of those always.
But do you ever doubt that something that you put out will not land or something that you put out will not resonate with mothers?
All the time. I get so nervous. Certain posts, no, sometimes it's totally easy, but when I create something brand new about maybe a new topic or maybe saying it in a different way, or maybe it feels a little more vulnerable, I get so nervous. And I usually will send it to like, a family member and a friend or two or three friends and say like, will you read this? And how does it read to you? And or get my husband to look at it. And I often get feedback where they'll say like, ooh, this part isn't working, or this part seems a little too whatever. And I'll go back and rework it. So when I'm nervous about something, I definitely get a lot of eyes on it before I post it. Um, but it's always scary, and sometimes it's funny because sometimes I'll think like, oh, this one's so good, this is really, and people won't really respond to it at all, and I'm like, oh, I guess that wasn't as relatable as I thought. And then something that I just throw together quickly and don't think it's that great, then it's like all of a sudden, it's also like you never know what's gonna really resonate. And so I think that's one of the reasons that like you just kind of got to keep creating. It's just like any kind of art that you're putting out, writing music, whatever. You just kind of keep going, and sometimes it'll hit, and sometimes it won't. And I think it's hard because often you want everything to be a home run, but at the end of the day, like, we all have our individual experiences, so you really don't know what's going to resonate with the
Yeah.
majority of the people. And sometimes something I think is really universal isn't, and then something I don't think is universal is, so
Mm.
it's also it's a fun learning experience, but yeah, it's definitely can feel a little scary putting something new up. Sometimes I'll put something up and I feel like I'm like holding my breath to see how
Yeah.
people react to it. Especially when I post political stuff, I'm like, okay, how's this going to be received? And usually it's okay, but yeah, it's always a little
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you could speak directly to a mother listening today who loves her kids deeply, but is also so tired, what would you tell her?
It's not you. Like you are not the problem. The hard parts are not a failure, not a personal failure. They are a systemic societal failure. I truly believe that. Of course, we all have our individual challenges based on like our personality or our kids or our household. But I think the parts of motherhood that are the hardest for the majority of us are hard because we don't have the kind of support that we need and that it really takes to be a fully formed parent. I don't think that we are meant to raise children alone with all the technology that we have, with all the expectations that we have, with all the workload that we have, with the financial strains. I just think that parenting is supposed to be a community project. It is supposed to be something undertaken with other mothers, with other people, with the generations before you, with partners who are available. I mean, I think all of that, we are missing all of that, and we are missing in the place of that. Okay, so we can't have that anymore. We can't have the village anymore. So where is the why haven't we shifted our expectations, or
Mm.
why haven't fathers been taught that they have to step up more, to in order to allow mothers or women to step into the workplace or to step a little bit back. So I just, anytime a new mother feels like it's, or not even new mother, just any mother feels like they're failing at this, or why can't I do this better? Why is this so hard for me? I just want to tell them that, it is not you. It is the system that you are expected to raise children in as a woman and as a mother right now. And until we change that system, this systemic failure is going to feel like a personal failure for moms. And so, I just want moms to know it's not you. You're not alone, and you're not failing. We are failing you as a society and as a culture, and I think we can change that, but it takes a lot of work on, unfortunately, our parts because we are the people feeling the pain of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And when did you personally realize this, all of this?
I mean, I think it was a slow burn over time. But I think as I started emerging from the first really hard year of motherhood, as I started like, getting a little bit of time back, a little bit of space, sleep, um, I think I started having a little more perspective on, what had happened in that first year. And I think also, making friends with other moms. I
Mm.
I I was so focused. I was so in such survival mode for so long of just trying to like get my work done and take care of my baby and like get through the day that I really didn't cultivate a community of other mothers. And I think that has been a huge change for me as well because I have so many good friends now who are moms of kids about my children's age and spending time with them, raising our kids together, talking about the challenges together. And then also, of course, the internet community I have, it just has normalized so much more of the experience of motherhood and has made me realize again like the universality of the challenges I'm facing. And so I think all of that has made motherhood a lot easier, not even easier, but a lot
More.
more sustainable, or yeah, I'm
Yeah.
able to like to roll with the punches more because I
Yeah.
feel less alone. And I feel like um I feel like I have gotten a little bit, I'm able to zoom out and see less about just like what I'm dealing with as opposed to what we're all dealing with. So I think but I think it was I think it was just a slow realization as you come out of that fog of the first
Mhm.
year and as you start to talk more and more with other moms,
Yeah.
which I think is something that's missing for so many of us. I mean, I think when I talk about the village and the community that we're missing, a lot of it is just that people just sit around and say like, "Oh yeah, that happened to me too. Oh, my baby did
Yeah.
that too." But look, a few weeks, months later, and we never struggle with it again. Like
Yeah.
I had a good friend who was having her, she changed daycares, and every time she would drop off her baby, he would just, scream, cry at the new daycare. And he didn't do it at the old one, and it was going on for like 2 weeks. And she was, losing her mind. What's going on? Should I take him away from this daycare? And she called me, and I was so glad she called because that exact same thing happened to my daughter, for a couple months, and then
Oh.
she was fine. But I was able to say to her, "Oh my gosh, that is normal. My daughter did it. It was just a separation thing, a development thing. Like just keep taking him, try to make it as quick as possible, get out, get in, get out. And of course now it's in the rearview mirror and it stopped happening. It hasn't happened again. And she's already forgotten about it. But I think if you don't have other mothers around you to say, oh, that's normal, or that happened to me. Oh, I know how hard that is, but it will get better. I think you start to think that you're a bad mother or that you're
Mm.
failing. But I think all it takes is another mom who you respect or trust or love saying, "Oh yeah, I did that. That happened to us too. It's okay." That can do so much, I think, for calming those nerves of early motherhood. I don't even know what your question was, but I hope I answered it.
Yeah, even I don't remember what it was, but I'm really enjoying talking to you. So
Great. Right
I
back
guess
at you.
we are okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, tell me something, Mary. Do you ever feel that pressure of performance in your life itself? Because whatever you're living and whatever you're experiencing, you're kind of putting it out in the world. So does it ever feel performative?
Well, I think I'm really lucky in that it's my comics, it's not me.
Yeah.
When I was blogging, way back before I ever drew comics, and this is, a lot of time before I even had kids, I felt like everything I did, I had to get a picture of it so I could talk about it on my
Mm.
blog or so I could share it. And again, like I had a small blog, but still it was like I was writing every day. And so it felt like if you're writing about your life every day, it feels like you need to get pictures of everything. And I felt this pressure. It was like, it became this thing where it was like, my husband was always annoyed because I'd be like, can we take a picture at everything? And he's like, got so sick of it. And so it's actually been really freeing for me because as I stopped blogging and as I focused more on just making comics, and as I stopped like writing about my personal life and instead started just writing about motherhood, I'm much more able to just live my life.
Hmm.
I make the note if something happens that's funny, I make a note about it, but then I put it away. I mean, sometimes I'll make a comic about something that happened 4 months ago. It doesn't have to be timely. I don't have to say we were at this thing yesterday and look at this picture from it. I can say a couple months ago I was at this thing and this happened. So I think the fact that it's not time sensitive, that comics can be
Yeah.
done anytime is really awesome. I think also that I'm able to make comics about other people's experiences, especially when they're really relatable to me. That frees me up from having to always use my life as the content. Um, and I don't show pictures of my kids' faces on Instagram, and
Yeah.
I don't do many pictures of myself except, just in my story every once in a while. So it's kind of nice, and that I think I've been able to kind of slowly take my private life away from, at least from Instagram, except for in drawn form, which feels
Yeah.
doesn't feel as personal to me. It feels very far removed. And I don't even, I don't put faces on my drawings. They're all just outlines. So it doesn't feel like I have to perform. I mean, I think the times I get the most nervous, honestly, about anything is when I have to make a video to put in my story for something. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, I hate showing my face. I hate making videos. Like I'll draw myself all day long and make myself talking, but when I have to actually be there, like, sometimes with a collaboration or a brand partner, they'll want me to say something in my story, and I'm like, okay. It's like it takes me so much energy to do it. So yeah, I don't feel performative when I do my comics, but definitely like if I have to talk. I just feel so it's not me.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
my video, yeah. I mean, I love podcasts. I can do all day, but if I have to like speak about something particular in a short video, it's just like I don't like it.
And do your children say something funny just so that you can put them on your comics?
They don't. Luckily, I don't think they're aware enough. I'm not showing them my comics all the time. So I don't think they realize like how often I'm posting or how many comics I'm making. You know, they don't, they kind of, they go, if it's something really funny, and I'll say like, that is so funny. Oh my gosh, I got to write that down. Like, are you going to make a comic? But like, if it's normally, if we're just chatting, yeah, they're not thinking about it, which is great. I think that's the great part of kids, right? They're so present and
Yeah.
they don't think about internet. They have no idea what's going on my phone, which is
Yeah.
great. Thank goodness. But yeah, yeah. Luckily, I don't think we're there yet. But as they get older, I'm sure that will start to be a thing I'll have to think about, and I've already done way less
Yeah.
comics about stuff that they say now that they
Yeah.
are getting older.
Yeah.
And when I do, it's usually if like I'm the butt of the joke. If they're saying something
Yeah.
that's making fun of me, then I'll maybe post it, but not if they say something that would be personal about them.
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
yeah, we walk that line as our kids get older. We have to kind of figure out what feels like their private life versus what is our experience, and I'm still trying to always figure out that line.
Yeah. I think you do that pretty well. I think you
Thanks.
do yeah, yeah. I really feel that, when I read your comics, I think it's about the universality of that experience of motherhood rather than a singular instance, and
Good.
that's what makes it even more relatable, you know.
Good. Yeah, that's the hope. That's what I'm trying to do. But it's
Yeah.
funny, it's funny because people do it's so hard to figure out because people we really like the personal. The personal we connect with the
Yes.
personal. But I think that so I'm always trying to figure out how can I make this personal and say what I want to say and make it universal. And I think that I don't always strike that balance right, but I'm trying to kind of do both. I'm trying to tell personal stories as an example of the universal, and then also tell the universal as an example of what could happen on the personal. And so it's like that. Yeah, I'm always kind of zoom in, zoom out, trying to figure out the right balance. And I don't know if I always get it, but it's fun. It's a good challenge. It's fun to try.
Yeah. And I think for women who are mothers, as you
Mhm.
said, who are the target audience for your comics,
Mhm.
that that intentionality is quite visible. It
Mhm.
may not be so to the other people because for them it's about an instance, but for us we know what we know exactly what you mean, you
That's
know.
exactly it. Yeah, you're so right because so I had a comic recently I posted about it was about like how everyone always needs me in the mornings and I never get a chance to like dry my hair, right?
Yeah.
And all the moms read this. The point of the comic, of course, was like everyone needs mom to do everything and she can never get a break. And so of course eventually she's gonna like blow up when her husband's like, what's the big deal? I just need to tell you
Yeah.
one thing. But she's been trying to blow dry her hair for 15 minutes and now it's all frizzy and lumpy and she's frustrated. So any mom reading that just understands that the comic is about how it feels to always be needed and never have to be able to find the 10 seconds you need to just do one thing for yourself. But all these people who don't get it, it went it like semi-viral, just, it basically was shown to people who aren't my audience. And I got all these comments saying, like, why didn't she just re-wet her hair and then dry it? Or, like just totally missing the point, or like she should just tell everyone no. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Yes, obviously we know that. But in practice, it's not that easy. And so, when you get these people who have no idea what the experience is, the day in, day out of experience, reading a comic, you're right, of an isolated incident, they just go like, what's the big deal? Can't you just lock the door? And it's like, yeah, sure. She could walk in the bathroom and lock the door and dry her hair. That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, I'm speaking to people who really viscerally understand this experience. And if you aren't in that audience, it might seem stupid to you, or it might seem annoying, or it might seem complaining, or it might seem ridiculous. But if you're in the audience, you immediately understand it, and there's no explanation needed. You
Yeah.
just feel it. So I think that's always the weird part about when my work gets shown to non-moms is it just sometimes they're just like, why doesn't she just do this one thing? It's like, okay, yeah, of course, in a bubble, in a vacuum, yeah, you could just do that one thing and everything will be fine, but not when you're a mom.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I have loved talking to you so much. I don't want this conversation to end, but I'm also very mindful of the time that we have together. So I have my last question to you.
Yeah.
If there's one comic you hope people remember you for years from now, which one is it?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard question. Um,
Okay, you
I
can take
guess,
two.
No, I mean, I guess I would say the double standard, one. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the very first comic that went viral of mine was one. It was called The Illustrated Guides, an illustrated guide to the double standard of parenting. And it really was, as I've mentioned, it's just two different images, mom and dad doing the same thing. The dad is praised for it, the mom is judged for it, right? That's the idea. And to me, that says it's the quickest, easiest way to say what I'm saying in all my work, which is that, society judges moms so harshly and it holds dads up on such a pedestal. And until those expectations change, nothing's really going to change in the experience and the internal experience of being a mom versus being a dad. And so to me, I think that comic, because it has, it really, I mean, also it changed my life, my career, because the reason I
Yeah.
have a book and everything is because of that comic. But I've done many iterations of that since, and I think just that theme to me is one that is really important to me, and I think is a message that I think anyone who's a parent can relate to. I mean, dads message me all the time saying, "Yes, I get so mad when, people praise me for just being a parent in
Yeah.
public. All these
Yeah.
women are acting like I'm like some savior for like taking my kid to the grocery store. Dads find it insulting too. And so I love that series because I think it just talks about this something that every parent has experienced and it does it in a really like simple way.
Yeah, yeah, that's my favorite too. I love it. Every time it pops on my timeline, I'm like, oh my God, one more, one more. Yeah,
Good, thanks. Yeah.
yeah. But thank you, Mary. Thank you for your honesty, your humor, and for turning the invisible parts of motherhood into something shared, seen, and sometimes even funny enough to survive. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being such a wonderful interviewer. You were such a joy to talk to and so easy to talk to. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And to everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. If this episode made you exhale, laugh, or simply feel less alone, please share it with another parent who might need it today. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps more parents find conversations like these. I'm Neha, and I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, take care and bye bye.